Right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, you seem to be in much better spirits than I am at the moment, mate.
Well, that's the penalty of being a Brisbane Broncos supporter, isn't it, Jake? You ought to pick your team a bit better, mate. Um, I'm obviously a complete neutral. I'm not a Hull KR fan. I'm not these days any. I'm just a fan of rugby league, and it's an old cliche, isn't it? But I think rugby league was the winner last night. It was a fantastic game. It had some great movement, some great tries, and a thrilling comeback by the Broncos. Obviously, Hull KR were winning 30 points to 4 on 60 minutes. Some people might have thought, well, Hull KR can put the queue in the rack. And probably they did, I suppose, you might say. But then the Broncos hit them with four incredible tries, marvellous tries, actually, the majority of them. And suddenly it was 30 points to 24. And with about 3 or 4 minutes still to play, I think one or two people in the crowd, a few Hull KR fans, were almost expecting Brisbane to score again and draw the game, but they managed to keep them out, and the glory went to Hull KR. But my goodness, it was a close thing in the end.
What was the atmosphere like at the ground, mate? Obviously, you had headed along to it, but for me, watching over here in Australia through the TV, you could hear the crowd, and it seemed like an unreal atmosphere.
Well, the atmosphere was absolutely amazing. The Hull KR fans do have quite a song sheet of things that they sing, and they were singing most of the night, of course, because from the moment that Tom Amone went over for the first try very early on, um, they were in the lead, and they never lost the lead, of course. So the Hull KR fans were in a great mood all night. I think the Brisbane players' reaction was that they'd never played in front of such a noisy crowd before, and although they almost quietened it as they came back in the second half. As I say, the Hull KR fans obviously did get a bit nervous, as did I. Um, and at the end, they were very glad to hear the final hooter, Jake. But it was amazing, and they've now got four major trophies in their possession. Obviously the World Club Challenge follows up the Challenge Cup, the League Leaders Shield, and the Super League Trophy. So I'm hoping they'll send out today a photograph of all those four trophies that they now hold, and that will be the image of the week in League Express, I'm fairly sure, if they do that.
Yeah, for sure, mate. Yeah, it was like you said, you touched on a few things there, but I was really impressed with the attacking style of rugby that was played throughout the match. We get to these matchups and we expect a tightly contested battle with more of a focus on defence rather than attack. But from the get-go, Hull KR were quick to cross, and the joy on Tom Amone's face to score a try in a big moment, which I believe was his debut for the club.
Yes.
Um, yeah, great to see. And I think the one thing that probably shocked the Broncos a little bit was how great their attacking kicks were. I think they scored four out of their
Near the
five
line,
tries
yeah.
off of attacking kicks.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, mate, who stood out for you? I think the Sky broadcast gave out a different player of the match to what the player of the match was voted on, like by the media at the stadium. Who was your player of the match, Mark?
Well, there were two players of the match, as you say. I think Jez Litton was absolutely outstanding. I think Jez Litton has nailed down the England hooking spot for whoever coaches England this year. We might want to come on to that, but whoever coaches England this year, I think Jez Litton is the number one, the man in possession of the hooking spot for England. There's no doubt about it. I thought his kick for Joe Burgess's try, the third Hull KR try, in the corner, was absolutely exquisite. Just a thing of beauty to watch, really, in my opinion. And so I thought he was outstanding. I also thought Tyrone May. I mean, he had a fantastic game as well, and his kick for Hull KR's final try by Peter Hiku was so well judged, wasn't it? It just went in
Bounced
behind the
perfectly.
Broncos defenders. Yeah, it couldn't have been better. And it was just thrilling stuff to watch, really. So absolutely outstanding. And Dean Hadley finished the game with what looks like a broken eye socket. He's got an enormous wheal under his eye, and I spoke to him after the game, and he was heading off to hospital. Obviously, it was obviously in a very happy mood, but I suspect, I don't know whether he's had the thing looked at already, but I suspect that he'll be missing the trip to Las Vegas with Hull KR. And of course, Hull KR did also lose Arthur Moorg, the fullback, who came off holding his arm. I'm not sure whether it's an arm or shoulder problem at this stage, but he will
I think
almost certainly be missing. Sorry?
some of the commentary too. I think for Arthur was potential pec.
Or yeah, maybe it's a
So
pack. Yes,
could
yeah.
be.
I think Willie
I'm
Peters
not
said
sure.
that after the game. So we'll see what the official diagnosis is. But obviously he'll probably be missing the trip to Las Vegas as well. And it was interesting that when he went off, Mikey Lewis reverted to fullback, which sort of took him out of the centre of operations a little bit for Hull KR, but nonetheless, he played a very significant role in the victory as well. But no, I thought all the Hull KR team played well. It was such an amazing contrast between how they played against York in the opening match of the season. I don't know whether you saw the highlights of that game, Jake, but they were a team transformed, really, and I thought they would be, if I'm really honest. I mean, the only thing I'm kicking myself for is that I don't gamble on rugby league for the most part, but when I think the odds of Hull KR winning was something like 11-2. The bookies were offering, and in a two-horse race, those were great odds, really, weren't they? And if I'd put the house on Hull KR, I'd have been worth a fortune now. But so some punters will have jumped for those odds and will be in a very happy mood this morning, I would think. But I'll tell you what, it
Yeah.
would have been interesting to see how the odds changed during the game, because at 30 points to 4, at 60 minutes, Hull KR would have been something like 1,000-1 on, I would think. And then as Brisbane came back to 30-24, gosh, the odds would have changed remarkably, I think.
Oh, absolutely, mate. When it got to 30-4, I said this to you before we started recording. I had serious thoughts about turning the TV off and getting ready for work because kickoff was 5:30 a.m. Local time for me. I got up early to watch it, and yeah, I was bitterly disappointed with the first 60 minutes of the match, mate. And then
Mm.
all of a sudden, it seemed like the Broncos kicked it into gear and remembered how to play rugby again. But it was too little, too late for the Broncos. Just on a few of the players you mentioned there, mate, I thought Dean Hadley was outstanding. The amount of times he would start the set, taking a hit up out of their own end, and then on third or fourth tackle, he'd be backing up for a second hit up.
Yeah.
He
It's
really,
remarkable that he didn't play for England in the Ashes, in my opinion.
yeah.
I think he should
We
have done.
had Australian commentary for the match, so we had Vossi and Brandy Alexander, and they were both talking and saying how they were shocked that he wasn't picked for England after that performance.
Yes, yeah, well, I think a lot of people were, and that's not to criticise those who were picked, but I think Dean Hadley under Willie Peters has come on enormously as a forward, and he's absolutely outstanding. And if he is out for a while with a possibly broken cheekbone, I obviously hope he isn't. But if he is, they will miss him. There's no question about it. They missed him at York, by the way. He didn't play at York. He had a rib injury, and they'd given him some sort of presumably an injection or treatment or whatever, but it didn't cure him in time. So he didn't play in that game, and it showed, quite honestly. But he did recover in time to play last night. But they've got to treat him with a bit of cotton wool at the moment, clearly, because they want him to recover from that facial injury as soon as possible.
Mm. Now, talk me through the vibe in the stadium, Martin, when there was Patrick Carrigan. I'm just looking at the times here, scored in the 60th minute off that great little Ben Tulty break through the middle of the field. Dean Mariner scored in the 62nd minute, and then Shibasaki finished it off scoring in the 65th minute. So 3 tries in 5 minutes. What was the mood like in the stadium after Shibasaki scored that third try in a row?
I wouldn't say that it was panic, but it was certainly concern among the Hull KR people. And Willie Peters made that clear after the game. Somebody said to him, "Did you feel safe when it was 18-0?" He said, "No, definitely not. You know that Brisbane can come back, from a 3-try deficit." He said he felt a lot safer at 30 points to 4, but he still knew that Brisbane would hit back. And of course, hit back they did. And Hull KR, in the last 20 minutes of the game, Hull KR did look very tired. There's no question about it. They were, they were just sort of struggling, and Brisbane got all the momentum. The thing that the incident that worried me most, if I were a Hull KR person, was when Hull KR got a penalty after Brisbane. This was after Brisbane had scored their 4th try, and the penalty didn't get kicked into touch. And very shortly after it, Katoni Staggs got the final Brisbane try on 76 minutes. Suddenly, it was, Adam Reynolds couldn't kick that goal, but it was 30 points to 24, and you could sense that feeling. The final 3 minutes was agonising for Hull KR fans. Really, they were so relieved to get through it. To be honest, it was an amazing achievement, but Brisbane did show that they've got this remarkable ability, haven't they, to play brilliantly in the last 20 minutes of a game. And in the playoffs last year, that worked for them because they weren't coming back from 26 points down. They were coming back. I think the maximum deficit they came back from was 14 points, if I remember rightly. But 26 points was just a bit too much. But nonetheless, it was a fantastic game, a fantastic event, and Brisbane played their part in it because, without that comeback, if it had stayed at 30 points to 4, the Hull KR fans would have been delighted, but it wouldn't have been quite the game that it was. So it was fantastic, and as I say, Brisbane did play a part, and there's no doubt. I think one of the differences between the teams was that Brisbane hadn't played a game before last night, and in the first half in particular, they just looked a bit disjointed. You can train all you like, can't you? But it's the game when you get onto the field, you've got to create all those combinations between players, and Brisbane were just not quite there, making some errors that they probably wouldn't make at all later in the season, and it didn't quite work for them. But I'll tell you one thing: we need to start taking this World Club Challenge a lot more seriously. The governing bodies on both sides of the world. When you see that it was a record crowd for a rugby league match at the MKM Stadium, every seat was sold, and the atmosphere, everything about the game, it was brilliantly presented. The Hull KR club did an absolutely wonderful job in selling all those tickets and then putting on a fantastic evening's entertainment. We've got to start taking this game a lot more seriously, and it's got to be penciled into the timetable every year. It's got to be fitted in to make sure that it works, even if it's played in England every year. We've got to find a way to do it, Jake.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, mate. And I think the way the Broncos played for me I don't want to be a fan that makes excuses by any means, but I just wish they had played or organised a few trial games beforehand. I mean, you heard the talk out of the Broncos camp all week long was how serious they were taking it, and how they wanted to do what Penrith couldn't do. If you're that serious about it, you organise a couple of trial games beforehand, so you are in match fitness, you are in game shape ahead of that match. Because, as you said, they just looked a bit rusty, and it took 60 minutes for them to really start to click again. The other thing I thought too was I was trying not to be too negative coming out of that match. For the first 60 minutes, I was very negative, but I think the positives the Broncos could take out of it was a lot of the tries Hull KR scored were errors on the Broncos' behalf, like Katoni Staggs dropping two balls coming out of the Broncos' end, Dean Mariner dropping two balls.
You
Both
never
led
see
to
them doing
tries.
that, would you, normally? But
Yeah.
actually, they were dropping them under great Hull KR pressure, Jake. It wasn't as though they were making mistakes for the most part that were from unforced errors. I
Mm.
mean, the Hull KR defenders were right up on them most of the night. They really were, and they were not going to give the Broncos an inch if they could avoid doing it. Of course, as the game wore on, as we got into the last 20 minutes, I think that strategy took its toll on Hull KR, as we obviously saw, and that combined with the Broncos' brilliance at creating opportunities from deep in their own half, led to all those tries. And as I say, they were great tries to watch. The ones the Broncos scored. The whole KR tries largely came from fairly close to the line, but most of the Broncos tries came from fairly deep and were great to see. So it was, if you like watching great tries, it was a great game to watch. There were
Mm.
10 tries altogether, of course, and the only difference between the teams at the end of the day was that Adam Reynolds could only convert 2 out of 5, and Arthur Morgan, Reece Martin converted 5 out of 5 for Hull KR. So the 6 points difference was actually made up of goal kicks.
Yeah. The other thing that frustrated me as a Broncos fan was just some of the poor options they took late in the sets too. Like there was a fifth tackle option there on the try line. Corey Pake scooted from dummy half and got tackled. When Reece Walsh made that break and decided to kick, and he kicked the ball dead when he could have
Mm.
just taken the tackle, and then they could have reset and had another attacking shot. And then there was a fourth tackle play there where Ezra Mam just sort of got the ball and he was at a standstill, and then he put a grubber through and it went straight into Mikey Lewis's breadbasket. And it was just little decisions like that where I thought if they just had got that right, they might have been in a better position towards the end of the match. But
Yeah. Well, there are
that's
lots of
not.
what ifs out there. It's a game of what ifs, really.
Oh yeah,
And at the,
and
at
Hull
the end,
are an example of a team that they almost played the perfect match. Their completion was high. They nailed their opportunities when they got them, and they defended their line pretty well for the most part. As you said, a lot of the Broncos' tries came from out of their own end. But yeah, it was an exciting match, mate. That's all I can say. And I hope the Broncos get another chance against Hull KR next year.
oh
Uh,
well, you never know. You never know that. I mean, Hull KR are going to have a big job on to hold on to their all these trophies that they've won. I mean, they won the treble and now they've won the quadruple. That no team has ever done that and then done it again the following seasons. Gosh, that's a big ask for Hull KR, and there are going to be plenty of teams snapping at the heels. I'll tell you one thing, one interesting point that Willie Peters made after the game was that they actually took inspiration from York. The opening game of the season, York beat Hull KR 1918, and Willie was saying that York had come into that game as the incredible underdogs, similar to what Hull KR were last night. But York came into the game absolutely convinced that they could win it and beat Hull KR, and of course they did do 1918 with a late field goal by Atta Hingano. And Willie was saying that that Hull KR this week used York's attitude last week as a source of inspiration, really, which I thought was a really interesting point to make. In other words, turn negatives into positives, Jake, is the message, and they did that and did it very successfully, of course, and it was terrific. Willie Peters is a really smart coach, and he actually spoke extremely well after the game last night in the media suite at the stadium. Absolutely outstanding, and I noticed in the Sydney Morning Herald today, I was just reading it before we came on here, and they're saying that he's going to be the next master coach in the NRL as and when he decides to move back there. And I think, as we've said on a previous podcast, I've got him. I wrote a piece a week or two ago suggesting that he should take over from Craig Bellamy at Melbourne when Craig finally retires. I think he'd be a perfect fit for that, and there's nothing that would change my mind on that score.
Yeah, and you'd have to think that that performance puts him nearly in the front seat for that England role.
No doubt about it. I mean, if I were running the Rugby Football League, I think I'd give Willie 24 hours to celebrate. But then on Saturday morning, before they start heading off to Las Vegas, I think I'd phone him up and just say, Willie, the job's yours if you want it for the World Cup this year. And I can't think I mean, he's obviously a terrific candidate for the job, in my opinion. And I think he'd be absolutely outstanding. And again, it would give him the chance to demonstrate to an Australian audience what a great coach he is, and on Australian soil, of course, later this year. So I think that's an obvious fit, and I'd be, I think I'd stake my house on Willie getting the job at this point in time, Jake, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair bet, mate. I'd love to see him in the England role. The other thing I admired about his game plan last night, I think the way he just kept putting those high kicks up to Dean Mariner's wing. He was keeping it away from Reece Walsh and putting it up high enough, or Mikey Lewis was putting it up high enough so that the defensive line could meet him there as he's catching the ball. Mm. And I just thought, like, so often it felt like the Broncos were trying to bring it out of that back corner. And I wonder if there's just something he saw in that Australian Kangaroos camp with Reece Walsh that he's recognised. And obviously you don't want Reece getting the ball in open spaces, but I felt like it worked for him for majority of the night last night. I think Mikey Lewis really proved himself on the big stage again last night, mate. I know he didn't really probably get the shot or the opportunity in the Ashes, but I think last night he probably sold his case to a lot of the Australian fans who hadn't seen him perform at that level yet. His kicking game has come such a long way since I started watching him in 2022, 2023.
It has come a long way, and the funny thing was that Mikey had quite a difficult week because he came in for a terrific amount of criticism following the York game. You probably recall he was yellow carded in that game for tripping Liam Harris, the York captain, and obviously a foolish thing to do. And he's taken responsibility for it, accepted that it was a dumb move, and it probably cost his side the points at York. But he sort of made it very clear that he's going to go to great lengths to try and ensure that sort of thing goes out of his game. And I think he will do. I think he's the sort of guy, he's so dedicated to what he does. He's such an incredibly, single-minded rugby league player, really, that I think he will get that out of his game, hopefully. Although, it won't get rid of the aggression and the competitiveness and the will to win that he obviously has, and which is shown throughout the last 12 months in all of Hull KR's success. He's played an incredibly important role. And of course, in the Ashes, he didn't really get the runouts. I mean, he's a natural standoff, and in the Ashes, Sean Wayne stuck with the England captain George Williams, and Mikey played almost peripheral roles, you might say. And for example, at Everton, he didn't come on the field till 70 minutes, by which time we'd lost the game. So I don't think you can criticise him too much for what he did in the Ashes, because basically what he wasn't able to do in the Ashes was displace George in that standoff role. But whether if Willie does get the England job, whether he will turn to Mikey Lewis as his starting standoff in the World Cup, obviously is yet to be determined. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if that did happen. And it would be an interesting combination, wouldn't it? Mikey Lewis and Jez Litton both starting for England in key spine positions.
No, that was one thing. The Australian commentary team were very impressed with Jez Litton's performance, and they cited his performance at the Ashes too. So,
I think Jez might be getting a few inquiries from NRL clubs. I'm not quite sure just offhand when his current contract expires, but it looks to me the sort of player who could certainly do a terrific job in the NRL for any ambitious club over there.
He's just very probing when he gets out of dummy half. Like, as soon as he sees that there's one marker or the markers are slow to their feet, he goes and he's looking for options in behind the ruck. And yeah, I think someone like the Perth Bears or PNG Chiefs, when they come into the comp, the smartest thing they can do would be to throw some good money at Jez, because if he's available, I'm sure that he'd fit right in the NRL.
Well, I'll tell you what, having been to Perth myself, my only regret is that I'm not a young 20-odd-year-old rugby league player playing in, at the highest level in this country, because I would love to go and live in Perth. It's a beautiful place, beautiful west coast of Australia. I think that'd be a fantastic thing. And obviously, a few players have already thrown in their lot from here with the Perth Bears, and I'd be very surprised if there weren't more of them, to be honest. So we'll see. And whether Jez Litton fancies a crack at the NRL, I don't think I've ever asked him, actually. I'm not sure whether it has been put to him. But who knows? We'll see. And of course, Hull KR would be extremely reluctant to lose him. So we'll see.
Now, mate, we will talk a little bit more about the World Club Challenge, but I just want to put out a personal message to Broncos fans and NRL supporters. I've seen a bit of commentary online blaming different things for the reasons why Broncos lost. I think Australian fans just need to suck it up and admit that, the Super League has some great clubs in their competition, and it's not a glorified pre-season match that some of the people are saying in comment sections. It's a serious fixture that we need to start taking more seriously, and just admit that the better team won. Because I hate when you see a team lose and their fans come up with all these excuses in the comment sections. You should just be able to agree that you were the better team won on the day, and that's all there is to it.
You're not suggesting that Aussie Rugby League fans are whingers, are you, Jake?
Mate, what I've been reading today...
Who would ever say that? They're bad sore losers.
Oh, mate, no. It's ridiculous. I mean, look, had the roles been reversed, I'm sure there'd be Hull KR fans whinging about certain things. You can never please everyone in sport.
But the Aussies would be, the Aussie fans would be crowing about it, wouldn't they? Let's face it. And, obviously when you win a big game like that, the winning side gets to crow about it. Or, the winning side's fans do, at least. So, it's just one of those things you win a game and you get the glory, and you lose it and you look for excuses. That's so often the case.
Like, we saw it from the Penrith fans as well when they lost 2 in a row. Obviously lost one on home soil as well. I don't know. You could argue that playing away might have been an excuse, different conditions may be an excuse, but
Well,
this whole
yes,
narrative around us not taking it seriously is ridiculous.
those are
Like,
factors you've got to overcome.
that's
It's
right.
like going to Las Vegas. It's a different situation. You've got to find a way to overcome it, and no doubt Hull KR play Leeds next week in Las Vegas, and they'll find a way to cope with the enormous distance they've got to travel and the different conditions they'll find when they get there. And that's just part of the game really these days. But no, it's funny. Of course, the usual thing for a losing team to blame is the referee. Have any Broncos fans yet started blaming the referee? I thought Liam Moore had a fine game, if I'm honest about it. I think. I mean, no doubt, if you scrutinised his performance for the full 80 minutes, you might find one incident where one of his decisions was questionable, but I've not found it yet. So, but what about
Yeah.
the Broncos fans? What do they say?
Oh, mate, I was quite happy as a Broncos fan with how he officiated the game. Actually, I saw a few comments criticising how quick it seemed like the Hull KR were off the line, saying that it was a short 10 metres, but I felt like that was both ways.
Yeah,
Um, and I actually saw a couple of Super League fans, obviously not Hull KR fans, complaining that when Liam Moore refs, the ordinary Super League game, that he sends everything upstairs to the video ref, but he wasn't sending anything upstairs in the World Club Challenge. And I was just like, oh, I'd prefer he refs that way. Just
so do I.
award
Yeah,
it.
the ref had
Uh,
a very easy night, didn't he?
yeah, that's it. So that was another funny thing I read and I was
And the
thought up.
video ref was Chris Kendall, who's a very picks everything apart very very carefully, and will often find an infringement where nobody else saw one. He's a real perfectionist, is Chris Kendall. And I was absolutely delighted that he didn't get anything to do last night, if I'm really honest about it, Jay.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was very pleased with how the game flowed, mate. Not too many penalties either, which was good to see. But yeah, I just hope that this experience and the quality rugby we saw will hopefully, as you said, make this a permanent fixture. And you and I have long been on this that I'd love to see the match played 2 weeks after the grand finals at the end of the NRL Super League season. So that way Jared Warrior-Hargraves could have played. For the Broncos, Kobe Hetherington and Tyson Smoothie could have played. It would be the same grand final teams.
Yes, that would be great, and hopefully the people who run the game on both sides of the world might get their heads together and see whether we can do that or not. But I don't hold out that much hope for that. It's maybe a hope too far, that one, Jake. But certainly in the long term, hopefully that might happen. But we shall see, and who knows?
Because I think like with the Vegas fixtures have complicated it now, and that's I guess why we didn't see Penrith play
That's
last
right.
year.
Yeah.
So if you think, that's probably a motivating factor to move it to the end of the year.
Oh, yeah.
But there's all these
But there's
complaints
also
about.
this talk, isn't there, about the other big pre-season game, which is the All Stars game that was played last week in Hamilton in New Zealand, and ended up as an 18-all draw, didn't it, between the Maori All Stars and the Indigenous All Stars, which again had some great action and played in front of a terrific crowd of about 18 or 19,000 people. So it just shows what a great demand there is for a game like that, um, prior to the start of the season. But quite a few clubs kept their players out of that game because they were playing pre-season games themselves. So it's difficult. There's an awful lot to fit in to a rugby league season on both sides of the world, and obviously international state of origin and so on and so forth. Um, there's an awful lot to fit in, and not enough time to fit it in. So it's problematic, and it needs somebody maybe to come in and take over the running of the game, all over the world, really, to sort it all out and to create um, a correlation between the competitions in both hemispheres.
We need a rugby league, an international rugby league dictator, mate, to come in and say we're going to have a 4 month break in the middle of the season for international fixtures,
Yeah,
and
well, I'll volunteer for that role, mate. If you can set it up, I'm happy to volunteer, and I'll do it for
uh,
nothing. Well, I won't even claim a salary.
maybe we should have loaded up our money on Hull KR, and then we could have bribed someone perhaps to give us that
Yes, we
role
should.
with the
We
winnings.
should.
Uh,
Incidentally, another thing that we should have. Somebody said afterwards to me at the game that Willie Peters, since he's been here, has never yet lost a game at the MKM Stadium. Every time that Hull KR have been to that stadium to play Hull, they've won every single time. And last night was just a continuation of that record of success for Willie. So, again, if that was another indicator that last night might go Hull KR's way, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's an incredible record, and I think this year, this season's probably the best chance for Hull to challenge the Robins on that record. They've got a strong side this year. So, look
They
forward to
have,
watching
yes.
those
And
matchups.
they set off with a win last weekend, which, of course,
Yeah,
Hull KR didn't.
that's right. Now, mate, I wanted to ask you a question about. I don't know if it was just that I've getting a lot more in my social media algorithm because I'm a Broncos fan, but it seemed like there was a few more English media, social media pages posting about the World Club Challenge. Does it feel like it's gotten more attention this year compared to previous years?
Well, it has in certain quarters, but not in others. I was driving home after midnight last night. I didn't get home till, something like about 1:30 because I live way up in North Yorkshire. And I was listening to the BBC Radio 4 news in the car coming home. The midnight news at 12 o'clock that runs for half an hour. And it got to the end, towards the end of the bulletin after about 25 minutes, and they came to the sport news. I thought, oh, right, see what they say about the game. And we heard about the Winter Olympics. We heard about a British girl breaking the indoor record for 800 metres. And we heard about some football events as well. But the World Club Challenge didn't get a mention. Didn't get a mention, mate, on the BBC. And the funny thing is, the BBC had actually broadcast the game on its BBC Three TV channel, which is a fairly minor channel, actually. But so they broadcast the game, but they didn't think that the result was sufficiently important to put on the 12 o'clock news. So that sort of shows that while the World Club Challenge may be getting more cut through in certain places, it certainly doesn't seem to be doing with the BBC, which is the major, obviously the major news organisation in this country. What it will take to do that, goodness only knows, Jake. But the BBC is. These days, some people think it's a pretty eccentric organisation when it doesn't give such a big event a mention on its major news programme.
Yeah, no, that's surprising, mate, because I know their BBC Sport Instagram page, they had a post up about it. I know the main Sky Sports page also had a post up about it, but yeah, that's disappointing. You think it would at least get a mention towards the end there. Maybe we need all the football players to go on strike for them to start giving it
It
more
would be
attention.
it would be useful, but we've just got to keep pushing. Really, I mean, there are some major English news outlets that don't mention rugby league at all. For example, the Daily Telegraph is one of the major news operations in the United Kingdom, as I'm sure you know. And we had the most sensational start last weekend to the Super League season that we've had in many years. And yet the Daily Telegraph didn't mention anything about rugby league on either the Saturday, the Sunday, or anything else. If you go onto their website, the last mention of rugby league was the Ashes. And, that's now several months ago. It shows and some people say, well, the mainstream media don't matter as much these days because people get their news and sporting information from elsewhere. But these publications are still very influential, Jake. And if you're not making their pages, it would be like the Australian newspaper in your country, which is probably the major newspaper that covers the whole of the country. It would be as if that newspaper didn't mention rugby league, and obviously, if it didn't, there'd be an outcry. So you can't imagine it, and that's the problem we're faced with here. That our national news media just don't seem to know that rugby league exists, and somebody's got to face up to that point. And disappointingly, I don't think that issue got a mention in the recent publication of the strategic review that the RFL put out a couple of weeks ago. So, but somebody's got to tackle it, mate, and the sooner the better.
Yeah, no, for sure, mate. And I think the best thing as a sport that we can do is just keep showing up every week, keep attending those games, guys, because the more that, Super League crowds can be packed out and the more tight contests we get, it's only going to make the product more attractive. And, the louder we are, I guess the more attention we'll gain. So,
absolutely.
One day, mate, one day. Now, anything else World Club Challenge wise you want to touch on before we move on to some other stuff, mate?
No, I think so. We've covered quite we've covered it really, haven't we? And
Yeah.
Congratulations to Hull KR and to Neil Hudgell, the owner of Hull KR, and the everybody connected with the club who did such a great job last night. And we'll see how they perform in their next game, which will be something like 10,000 miles away in Las Vegas. That's going to be a big ask for them against Leeds Rhinos.
That's it, mate. We go from one major event to the next. So it's exciting times for the Hull KR fans, and
no doubt about it.
I'm sure for those fans that are travelling over to Vegas, it must be party central at the moment. I don't know if you'd stop partying until you come back from Vegas. I'll be making sure I had 2 weeks booked off work.
Well, they'll face a very real challenge from Leeds. So they don't want to go 0-2, do they? At the start of the season, so that's going to be quite important for them.
That's it. Now, mate, I just want to quickly touch on just a couple of matches from last weekend. There was a lot of focus on those new clubs that have been brought back into Super League. One of our big concerns last week was how big the scorelines were going to be and if they were going to be able to cope in round one of the Super League. To my surprise, mate, 2 out of the 3 got wins.
Well, I think all 3 did very well. I mean, Bradford were the only losers, but they only lost by 7. And actually, with 5 minutes to go, they were drawing 20-all at Hull FC. And then Will Price dropped a goal, and they then scored a try right at the very end, did Hull, to make it 27-20. The other 2 clubs, well, all 3 clubs made me look like an idiot, if I'm honest about it, because I predicted that they'd probably all suffer pretty heavy defeats, obviously starting with York. I'd been very critical of the RFL for organising the York v Leeds game as the opening game of the season. I'd said that's ridiculous because it'll probably be a one-sided game. Hull KR will win convincingly, and it'll be a bit of a damp squib. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong, could I, really? And I hold my hands up high. I got it absolutely wrong. York were magnificent and won the game. And tonight, as we speak, they'll be playing at Headingley against Leeds. And that's going to be a real test for them because Leeds lost their opening game at Lee, but they're bringing back a lot of players for tonight's game who didn't play in that Lee game. So York will face a very stern test tonight. But I've always said that Mark Applegarth, their coach, is a much better coach than he appeared to be in 2023 when he coached Wakefield and they were came bottom of Super League that year and were relegated. Mark that year was, had one hand tied behind his back effectively. And I think since being the coach at York, he's shown what a great coach he is. I hope it's a great game at Leeds tonight. I can't quite see York winning again. I'm almost reluctant to tip against them, mate, because they'll probably show me up again if I do.
What's the old saying? Once bitten, twice shy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, mate. Don't worry though. You weren't the only one. I think on the readers poll, about 40 to 50% of readers and listeners were voting that match to have the biggest scoreline.
Yeah.
You weren't the only one, mate. I think they shocked a lot of people.
I think the club that really shocked me though was Toulouse Olympic, because I thought they'd go down by about 30 points at Wakefield last weekend, and they won the game, but by 2 points, and deservedly so, and played far better than I thought they were capable of. I thought they were absolutely outstanding. They obviously caught Wakefield. I think it's probably fair to say that Wakefield underestimated them. Wakefield would deny that, of course, but I think psychologically, and let's not forget when Wakefield won the championship in 2024, they played Toulouse in the grand final and ran up a very big score against them. And quite a few of the players who played that night are still with Wakefield and probably remembered that easy win and assumed that it might happen again. But it didn't. Toulouse were outstanding. Ollie Ashall bought the fullback. He was the player of the match. And tomorrow night, they play their first home game, and they're playing Castleford. And that will be a tough game for Castleford, who unfortunately have lost their fullback, Blake Taff, who's gone down with an ACL injury, which is so sad. So they'll have to reorganise to play that game. And you would expect Toulouse to give them a real tough time. But we'll see. It's going to be quite interesting. If Toulouse could get off to 2 wins in their first 2 games, that would be an extraordinary achievement, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, mate. No, I'm really looking forward to this weekend's matchups, and we will touch on that very shortly. But I just thought we may as well, while we're live now, you would have seen the new State of Origin eligibility representative rule changes over here, mate. Just a quick explainer for our listeners. So essentially, if you come to Australia and play junior rugby league before the age of 13, you can represent Queensland or New South Wales and a Tier 1 nation. So England or New Zealand, other than Australia, obviously. So now for players like Adam Fanua-Blake, he can now qualify to play for the New South Wales Blues. And another example for Queensland would be Britton Nickera. He now qualifies to play for Queensland. So in a way, they've kind of solved a bit of a situation. They've made it a bit more clearer, which for me, I think New Zealand are probably the team that benefits the most from this. Given that,
if you think about players who qualify for England, Victor Radley is one, isn't he? Who could, I don't know whether his time as a potential Origin player is now probably over, but nonetheless, he could qualify to play for New South Wales, presumably having played for England. And the other player who's mentioned quite a lot is young Sam Walker of the Roosters, who was born in England, of course, I think. Has sort of expressed some interest in the past in playing for England, and now the door, if he wants to play Origin, presumably for New South Wales, or is he a Queenslander? I'm not quite so sure.
Queensland, I'm pretty sure.
Queenslander, yeah. Well, so he could now do that and also play for England. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? It's going to be quite a potential change, I think.
And because, for instance, Jason Taumalolo, back in if the rules were eligible back in his prime, he could have played for Queensland all along. There was a lot of questions asked around Jerome Hughes. Does he qualify for Queensland? But I think he might have just moved here after the age of 13 because, mate, I would have loved to have had him eligible for the
Oh
Maroons.
gosh, yes. Yeah.
Mate, I think this is good now because if a player feels like they're aligned to say the Kiwis, but they opt to pick Samoa or Tonga because of for heritage reasons, just so that they can still play for the Blues. Now some of those players will then have the decision. Well, I could either represent Tonga or New Zealand and still play for the Blues. So I
Well,
don't think it's a
I'm
bad
going to make
change.
a big prediction, Jake, and we can come back to this later in the year. But my prediction is that New Zealand will win the World Cup this year, and I think that's this latest move will be one very small cog in the wheel that might help them to do that. But I think the New Zealand squad that they're capable of putting together is potentially a World Cup winning squad, and I think it would be the the best thing ever for the competition if Australia didn't win it this year. I know, obviously, you're an Australian, so you probably don't share that view, but I think if New Zealand won it, I mean, the only thing better than New Zealand winning it would be England winning it, of course. So who knows? We'll see.
And let's not count out Samoa or Tonga. And one last final point on that, mate. This now means that Kalen Ponga can go and represent the Kiwis and still keep his Maroons jersey.
Yeah, yeah, well, absolutely, and who knows? There are going to be some interesting ramifications of this, aren't there? As the year rolls on, I think, Jake.
No, for sure, mate. Now, any other news that you can think of, mate, that we should touch on before looking at this weekend's matchups? I know they start tonight, but this
No,
podcast will be out very
I think
soon.
I think we're all set. The hopefully set for another very exciting round of Super League games, and we'll soon, by the way, be finding out who the next chairman of the Rugby Football League is, because they've had interviews for that position, and my prediction is that Nigel Wood will continue in that role. But they're also looking at a new chief executive of the RFL, and I noticed Tony Mestroff was being very widely mentioned in dispatches, the ex-Manly chief executive, and who obviously played for several years over here for London Broncos and for Wigan. He'd be an interesting potential appointee, wouldn't he? So, and there's still a little bit of rumbling below the surface about the NRL taking a financial stake in English Rugby League, but nobody's quite sure where that's at the moment. So we'll just have to wait and see.
You wait, mate. The news cycle, it always starts heating up around Vegas. I'm sure there'll be a few little things slipped to the media or leaked to the
Absolutely.
media around that week. So keep an eye out for those headlines. All right, mate, let's start with tonight's matchups. I'm just trying to do the time differences in my head here. We've got three matches tonight. You've kind of touched on the Leeds versus York matchup. Who do you like in that one?
Well, you've got to go for Leeds because, as I say, they're going to put out a strong side tonight, and I just, I mean, York had their sort of grand final last week against Hull KR. Um, uh, they were amazing. By the way, they've got one young guy, Xavier Var, who I think is probably a Queensland Cup player up to last year, who had I thought an outstanding game for them. Looks a real big giant forward, and will cause Leeds quite a bit of trouble if he plays as he did last week. But I can't quite see that being enough to actually beat Leeds. I think they'll have Jake Connor back in the side tonight, presumably, and quite a few others. I've not actually. I ought to check on that before saying it because they've announced their squads, and I'm not quite sure. Just speaking from memory, precisely what the what the squad will be, but they've. Let me just check on it, Jake, while we're
Yeah, you're right.
talking.
That's
Um,
right. Is that a? Let me just have a look at that one. That's at Leeds, isn't it? That matchup.
yeah, Yeah,
Yeah.
Leeds tonight are going to have Jeremiah Matautia making his debut, and they've got Jake Connor, Cameron Smith, and Keenan Palacia also coming into contention for selection, named in their 21-man squads. So that's going to be quite a challenge for York, I think. And York, more or less, are going to have the same squad as they had against Hull KR, so they'll play with the same spirit. But as I say, I'd forecast something like a 10-point Leeds margin tonight in that game.
And so Mike Acevo's expected to be back in action?
Yes, Mike Acevo, yes,
Yeah.
indeed, making his Super League debut. So,
Hey, it'd be great to see him back in action. I feel like I haven't seen him play a game in ages.
no, no,
Probably
well, he
been two
didn't.
years.
He suffered that injury before the start of the season last year, and he was just out for the year. So that was really disastrous for him and for Leeds. But we'll look forward to seeing him, and no doubt he'll cause York a lot of problems if he does play.
I can see him becoming a real crowd favourite there. I think there'll be a few chants and songs made about him once the time comes.
No doubt.
Uh, all right, mate. Let's go to the Bradford Catalans matchup. Who do you like here?
Yeah, that's a really interesting. That's a really interesting question because it's going to be Bradford's first Super League game at Oddsall since 2014. 12 years since I last played a Super League game. They've got a couple of injuries. Jaden Ockenbar and Dan Russell are both going to be out. Catalans are going to be missing Benjamin Garcia, as far as I'm aware. Got a one-match suspension. I don't think he appealed against it. So he will probably be out. But when they beat Huddersfield last weekend, the spine of Toby Sexton and Lewis Dodd, I thought, played exceptionally well in very bad conditions, incidentally. And if they play like that again, I think they might create a bit too much for their hosts. So I think I would go for a Catalans win tonight, but probably by about 6 points. But quite honestly, if emotion does count for anything, the crowd will probably yell Bradford home as Hull KR did last night. So I'm predicting a Catalans win, but I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if Bradford upset the apple cart and got their first 2 points of the season.
Well, one of my mates, Ben Condon, plays for Catalans, and he had his first game for the club, or first Super League for the club last week, and he was telling me it was a bit of a mud pit that they were playing in, but he seemed pretty excited. I said, "Don't worry, mate. Later on in the year when it's raining in the north of England and it's nice and sunny down there, you'll be very thankful." But he seems pretty excited to play at Oddsall. Obviously, he's aware of the history of that ground, and he was pretty pleased to get a try on debut for the club last week. So, hoping he has another good game this weekend or tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's very unusual to be so muddy in Perpignan, I mean, the rain that they had last week was not a common thing. And, your mate Ben, hopefully he'll play on in much drier conditions in future home games there.
We might have to try and get him on the podcast.
It'd be great. Is he
Yeah.
learning how to speak French? That's the main thing.
Oh, mate, he's a country Queensland boy. Went to school at Rockhampton Grammar in Rockhampton, so he's a central Queensland boy. I just don't know if the central Queensland twang will sound nice with the French language. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Or
Well, you never
give
know. He
it.
might meet a nice French girl, and he might. I don't know if he's married. Is he married, or does he have his girlfriend with him? Or who knows?
No, no, no. So he might. We'll have
And
to.
that might accelerate his desire to learn the language. Who knows?
We'll quiz him if we can get him on. We'll give him a bit of a French quiz, perhaps.
Absolutely.
All right, mate. And the other matchup tonight, we've got St Helens taking on the Lee Leopards, and these two, they know how to put on a
Oh,
match. These two.
well, Leah come roaring into this game full of confidence. They beat Leeds reasonably well last weekend. They've got a very strong side. I don't think they've got any major injury worries. apart from David Armstrong at fullback, who's still out recovering from the knee injury he suffered last year. St Helens, on the other hand, they lost Jack Welsby to a busted shoulder last week, and I think he'll have had an operation on it this week, but he's going to be out for a long time. And that he'll join Mikey Lewis, St Helens captain, who's thought to be likely to miss the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season. So it will be a weakened St Helens side. They are missing Morgan Knowles, by the way. I don't know whether you saw Morgan Knowles playing for the Dolphins last weekend, but he got a very blooded face against the Titans. But I think he'll be a great signing for the Dolphins. But obviously Saints will miss him, which is the other side of that coin. But I think I think Saints might just find the resolve to win this game, which is I'm probably going against form, really, in saying that. Lee fans will be travelling in big numbers and very confident that they'll get this win. But I think Saints might be a bit desperate. Obviously, their new coach Paul Rowley wants to get his first win under his belt, and I just think that they might manage to conjure a victory, but only by a very narrow margin. So I think I'd go for about a 4 point St Helens victory tonight, mate.
Yeah, I think it'll be a close one, mate. It's so hard with all these matches kicking off at the same time. I find myself trying to flick between the channels. Got up the other day and I was awake, so I put it on, and I think it was about 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. our time, and was having to flick between the channels. But I think I'll be watching that Saints match. Now, on what do we got here? Saturday night, we've got Toulouse taking on Cass. We've touched on this game a little bit, mate, but who do you like here?
Well, I think I'm going to stick my neck out and tip Castleford to win, because they drew the short straw, really, in round one, having to host Wigan. And they didn't play badly, but didn't manage to win. They lost by 10 points to Wigan. I think that they might just have enough in the tank to go over to Toulouse and shock their hosts. They'll be doing it, as I've said, without Blake Taff, which is very unfortunate. They've actually moved very quickly to replace him with Ash Golding, who played for Huddersfield last year and played at full-back. But of course they've got another option. They could play the young full-back Fletcher Rooney, who I think is a really promising player, but missed much of last season with injury. He's back in contention now, and I think he's the potential star of the game. So, with no disrespect to Ash Golding, I hope that Ryan Carr opts to play Fletcher Rooney at full-back. And I think they could, they could pull it off. I have a funny feeling that Toulouse played a really great game against Wakefield, but I'm just not sure whether they can stay at that level for 2 successive weeks. They might win by 20 points and show my, bad judgment again, of course. But I'll tip Castleford by 6 on this occasion. I suspect I'll probably be in a minority tipping Castleford, actually, Jake.
Yep. No, it'd be great to see Fletcher Rooney back, mate. I know the excitement Cass fans had watching him play last season, so let's hope he can continue that form that he showed glimpses of. Moving to the next matchup tomorrow, we've got Wigan taking on Hull FC.
Well, Hull went to Wigan twice last year and won both games in the Challenge Cup and in the Super League. Can they do it again? Well, who knows? Wigan have suffered their own injury blow. Jake Wardle is out with what appears to be an ACL injury, as far as I'm aware. So that's a blow for them. Hull, on the other hand, have got Liggy Sow missing. He's suspended. Zach Hardacre drops out with a leg injury. And Jake Arthur, who is their new signing from Newcastle Knights, he again won't play because he's got a hamstring problem. He didn't play in their opening game of the season. So I think that could just mean that that Wigan might just have a bit too much for for Hull. But I think it could be another close game, and it wouldn't surprise me an awful lot if Hull shocked them again. But I think Wigan will be ready for them this time, and I think Wigan will win by about 10 points.
Tell you what, mate, it might just be because I'm, on the other side of the world at the moment, but with all the Hull KR success, it kind of feels like Wigan might be just slipping under the radar a little bit. I know it's only
Well,
early
yeah.
days, but it feels like a lot of the attention that is usually on Wigan isn't on them this year.
Yeah, they might want to be getting back into the spotlight as well. So, yeah, that's an interesting point, Jake. Absolutely.
And then, mate, Sunday, the final matchup, we've got Huddersfield taking on Wakey. Who do you like in this one?
Well, I think Wakefield will have to recover from their poor start. They've got too much talent to not do, and I think they might just be a bit too strong for Huddersfield, who as usual seem to have various injury problems. Adam Swift is still out. They've got Adam Clune. I don't think is probably still not ready to return at half back, and they'll probably have one or two other problems as well. I would think so. I suspect that Wakefield will go there and win on Sunday afternoon. But again, you can't be absolutely certain about anything like that. It's sort of the Super League. The great thing about Super League this year is that it is very finely balanced, and I think I actually think that we really need to see Huddersfield coming back into some sort of form because they've been disappointing for 2 or 3 years now, and I think we need them to improve. And I'm hoping that they manage to draw a decent crowd on Sunday. They're the disappointment in terms of drawing crowds in Super League, but I'm sure Wakefield will take a lot of fans there. It's a fairly short journey to Huddersfield for Wakefield fans, and I think they'll probably be able to cheer their team home, mate, by about 10 points.
Yeah, mate, no, that sounds good. Well, we've had a lot to talk about, mate. Obviously, we've had an in-depth breakdown of the World Club Challenge, and we'll get this one out as soon as we can today, hopefully, so our viewers and listeners can listen to it before the first match tonight. Um,
Let's hope so.
yeah, anything else you want to touch on, mate, before we
No,
wrap
I
it
think
up?
that's just about everything, mate.
We're all talked out. People are sick of listening to us. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, for any of our viewers and listeners, if you want to, have your say on what you thought about the World Club Challenge, we welcome your opinions in the comment sections. And yeah, mate, I'm going to go and watch some of these trial matches that are taking place now as the NRL clubs get ready. And yeah, I'll touch base with you next week, eh?
We'll do it again, mate. See you soon.